Welcome to the 2016 National Scrabble Championship recap. This is Kenji Matsumoto. Without any further ado, let's get started! At the beginning of this tournament, it was all Ian Weinstein. Here's Ian playing Thievery to clinch the game against Joey. Ian clinches the game against Seth Lipkin by playing Assuming. Here against Will Anderson, he's behind, but then he plays Loxed, and when Will tries to block, he plays Maiasaur. In this case, Ian clinches the game with Disagree. As you can see, Ian actually had a 3-game lead halfway through the tournament. The person who would battle back was David Gibson. Here, David Gibson actually wins a game by 340 points against Ori Swift. Here, David Gibson plays Keeping, putting away against Joel Sherman. In fact, David Gibson actually runs off 10 straight games and actually takes a 2-game lead over Ian Weinstein. This would set up a clash where the two of them would play several games. Ian would fight back. Here, he plays the word fajitas, blocking the word corneas by David Gibson. Later in the game, Ian plays Steely, putting the game away. In another game between David Gibson, Ian plays Lutz, outrunning David Gibson. In yet another game, Ian plays You Demon, again putting away David Gibson. At this point, it seemed that Ian had David Gibson's number. This brings us to the final game of the championship. So Gibson starts, Ian draws like shit. There's no good way of putting it, he draws terrible. Gibson does his whole closing the board thing. He's trying to close the top left quadrant. Ian trades again. Gibson bingos. And yeah, this game just starts really bad for Gibson, or for Ian rather. He just can't draw anything at this point. Plays Leary. I really would have liked to see Gibson play Leno here, over Honed, and try to really just block the top of the board entirely. But he plays QI, which I'm a little bit surprised by. Gibson's a really defensive player, so when in doubt, he usually does those sorts of things. Ian finally draws bingo, and Gibson plays Noda, which is essentially the same thing as playing Leno, except, you know, he might have had some better Q options, though. Played Leno first. Anyway, yeah, just not going very well for Gibson at all. Or for Ian at all. Sorry guys, for confusing the names. And yeah, as you can see, Gibson's firmly in control, and then things start getting a little bit weird. Gibson plays Kaner. I think he's trying to form a staircase, but I don't really think this is the best way of doing it. He's trying to close that ER line, which I do understand, but there's probably better ways of going about it. I would have just played Conelrad. You can always re-parallel it, and even if he draws a bingo in that case, you just outrun him. It's not such a big deal. If Conelrad was opening a little bit more, and the lines were a little bit better, I would understand, but there's really no way of playing left after Conelrad. You can just re-parallel it, so I think I actually like that better. Ian's just trying to score. He's just trying to keep up so that when he, if he draws something, he can stay in the game, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do at this point. Gibson just keeps blocking. And I think Ian makes a very, very pivotal mistake here by not playing Biotic. Biotic takes an A front hook for Abiotic, and it also takes a back hook of Biotics, and that would have been a very big opportunity for him to open the board. That's the one thing that I'm sure that Ian probably wants back looking at this game. As it turns out, it actually turns out pretty well for Ian. I think Gibson maybe does a little bit, he's trying to make a staircase, as you can see, but it just doesn't really work out for him. Ian actually makes a pretty good play here in terms of making a fork. Ideally, Gibson would really like to do something about this, upcoming fork that Ian's kind of planning, but it just doesn't really work out. Ian makes an A-hook here as well. He actually gets close to Ricotta a few times. This draw, he's one letter away. And then he's one letter away here. That being said, Gibson burns his last S by playing this, which is really not a very good idea. You really don't want to burn your last S when you can help it. He would have been probably much better off making a blocking play like Vo through the O at row 8. You really want to keep the S. The S is a really, really good blocking tile. It's not just a scoring tile, it's not just a setup tile. It stops them from setting up, and it blocks a lot. And when you play when you just play it off here, you're really putting yourself in a lot of trouble. If you're going to play, you should just play Vs. Yes, it does open the V for a bingo line, but that's not really that important because you can just play back, and it's actually really hard to use the V as well. He also wants to create scoring spots. He also wants to use the bottom right quadrant to score. Scoring is really, really key here. Ian plays Pika, forks the board, and Gibson starts to look a little nervous. When we actually saw Gibson on the table, he just started shaking his head, and his mannerisms just changed. And yeah, you could kind of see it. It's very, very understandable. He plays Pluot, probably just missing people. And, then he draws really, really unfortunately. He draws 4 O's. And he actually makes a really, really good play here by playing P. There's all sorts of things he can draw. He can draw the Y or the U, and then he can play... it's basically a setup for the F, and he can do a lot with that. And if Ian plays, he empties the bag. If Ian doesn't bingo, then he can just block. He can just block the top row 3 with some short play. Either just dropping the N over there, or... there's always something that you can do to at least inhibit the line. And as is the story of the entire tournament, he plays off EE, Ian bingos, and he draws S blank. And David Gibson is your 2016 National Scrabble Champion. So here we have a look at the various boards that Gibson was playing on. And we have the closed off quadrants in blue. Those are the places that are really difficult to play. And as you can see, almost every game that Gibson plays has a large amount of space that's just really hard to access. And that's part of Gibson's MO. Gibson wants to keep the board really closed. He wants to keep the board so that there's not a lot of space for you to go into. And therefore, it's just a lot harder to bingo and a lot harder to score and a lot more tactical. Especially this top left quadrant. Gibson really likes to close that down and make it very difficult for you to play in that area. So in essence, you're only playing in about 3/4 of the board. And that's really a hallmark of the way that David Gibson plays. Another secret to Gibson's success is that he makes plays towards the center of the board and tries to induce his opponent to open the outer regions of the board, allowing better scoring and bingo opportunities. So long as he keeps his opponent away from triple word scores, he's generally going to be able to force his opponent to create better scoring opportunities than he provides his opponents. So one of the main ways that Gibson wins games is by waiting for his opponents to open the board so that he can bingo through the opening. So for example, here's a game that Gibson played, where he bingos through Newt that his opponent plays. Bingos use static. Here's another opening, basically same thing. His opponent plays Waynes, and then Gibson plays Serrano. This is basically how Gibson wins games. He closes the board, and then waits for his opponent to make an opening, and then he pounces. One thing about Gibson is that he hates floaters. He really doesn't like them at all. So here's an example of a play that he made. He played Cause. Most experts would probably play something else. They play either Zodiac, or Exotic, or Azoic. But Gibson would always play Cause, pretty much 100% of the time, because he doesn't want an 8-letter word to completely ruin his closed board strategy. Gibson's primary objective is to kill bingo lines and to kill space that ruin a closed board. So, for example, he's going to play the word delator here, mostly so that he can block this tabs hook, and just basically shut off the entire top of the board. If you play through the R, then there's going to be no way to go north, and there's just, you're going to end up with a board very similar to the one that we have here. Nota does much of the same thing. He's blocking the E and the D in honed, and he's basically just trying to ruin the top of the board. Same thing with a play like In. In may keep a really bad leave, and Gibson does keep a lot of really bad leaves when he's trying to close the board. But he thinks it's worth it because he's going to get to close the E and he's going to get to close the bottom of the board, making it very difficult for his opponent to bingo on future turns. It's worth noting that this is actually a really good board against Gibson, in a really good situation to actually outplay him. Here, Ian has quite a few options with this sort of rack. He can either keep fishing to a bait hook, something like ricotta or something like that, and he's going to get to fish at that repeatedly. Especially the blank, this is actually something that's really, really practical, and something that Gibson is not very good at blocking, since it's really hard to block that sort of opening. And even though it's really unlikely to get it after one time, if you get to keep fishing over it over and over and over again, eventually you're going to hit something like that. Another thing that Ian does that actually did really, really worked was the setup that he actually made. So Pika actually creates a fork, creating bingo lines for the P and the I, as well as the ag. And that's going to allow him to always have two bingo lines that are really easy to open. Even if one line gets blocked, he's going to get to keep opening the board over and over and over again. Especially something like ag, since it's actually going to be really hard to block. As soon as you block ag, it's just going to get reopened, and it's kind of like a forced repeated opening, much like a bait is. Just not really much you can do about it. And those sorts of things are the sorts of dynamics that really give Gibson a lot of problems. So you might be wondering what this means for the future of Scrabble tournaments. I think a lot of people are going to start trying to copy David Gibson. I think we're going to see a lot more tactical play and a lot more defensive play. I also think that a lot of younger players are going to be trying to counter David Gibson's strategy very, very regularly and spend a lot of time and effort thinking about, okay, what do I do against this? I talked to a lot of young players who are really unhappy after this tournament, especially those on table one. And they're not going to just sit by idly and just be like, oh, well, I don't know what to do. They're going to go and look at these games. They're going to go and analyze these games. And they're going to realize, A, what they did wrong, and B, what David Gibson is doing wrong, and how to fight back against it. And they're going to fight back. There's going to be specific technology and specific techniques that are developed just for David Gibson. I do root for younger players, but I made a video about what some of the things you can do against David Gibson. Play towards the center of the board, and develop a lot of hooks and forks and openings that can't be blocked, and basically fight fire with fire. And tax David Gibson for doing what he's doing. If he's gonna spend all this effort to close the board, let him close the board. If you're ahead by 30 or 40 on a closed board and you're playing against David Gibson and it's your turn, he's gonna have a lot of issue if you don't open the board for him. It's gonna be very, very difficult for him. So, yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult for him, maybe if he keeps drawing the way that he drew this tournament. He's a great player, but David Gibson also drew really well this tournament. He drew very many blanks. And yeah, maybe part of that's me being bitter because I have not drawn a lot of blanks, but David Gibson is drawing quite well. But there is a lot of blueprints as to how you can play against him. I think Ian did a very good job. Trey has done a very good job. And a lot of technology has been developed. As people keep looking at his games and see his racks, which is something that they haven't been able to do before. We got to see, essentially 13 games of David Gibson and his racks. As soon as they see these sorts of things, technology is going to be developed against him, and it's just going to be very difficult for him in the future. So before we wrap up, I want to talk about the Twitch stream. We had a Twitch stream, had 4,000 people. That's twice the number, more than twice, like 3 times the number of people who actually play Tournament Scrabble were watching the stream. And while, we're probably not going to get all of those people to actually play, in fact, we'll probably get less than, if we get 10 of those people to play, it would be, pretty lucky. Those people are really, really important. Not so much in terms of getting future players, although that's certainly nice, but in terms of getting future audiences for sponsors, Hasbro, just getting the game out there. First of all, potentially people will pay if we can get that kind of exposure, if we can get that kind of exposure consistently, or get a better exposure consistently. Then people will pay money. I would pay money if I could plug my book for I don't know, 20 seconds or something like that, I would pay money. Hasbro certainly would love to pay products. Nintendo does it all the time. All these, companies that make these major games, they have no problem whatsoever just shelling out the money for, a potential advertisement spot. I'm sure they make a lot of sales from that. And they get a lot of exposure. So we need those people. And when we put on a good broadcast, we can get more of those people. When we put on a bad broadcast, we get less of those people. It's not so much to get people to join the game as to give people an entertaining and interesting experience that gives us more of an audience in the future. And I don't think the Twitch broadcast did that. First of all, just from a Scrabble standpoint, I had a problem with it. I don't really think the commentators know that much of what's going on. I think Robin probably said, "I don't know what Gibson's doing," probably about 20 times, which is 20 times too many. You could say it once maybe, and then you can ask. But don't put yourself over the commentators. Don't say, "I know what I'm doing," and the guy at table 1 has no fucking idea. Because that's kind of how it came across a lot of the time. And you really just make yourself sound stupid. Especially since a lot of times, a lot of the plays that were just kind of ignored, a lot of the key tenets of the game and a lot of the key plays of the game, just like, "Oh, well, he did this," and then just no comment on it whatsoever. From a pure Scrabble standpoint and from a Scrabble expert standpoint, I found that pretty annoying. But the bigger problem was the lack of communication with the Twitch audience. So I care about these people a lot. These people are my age. These people play games that I'm interested in, and I talk to a lot of people over the Twitch chat. I found it much more interesting, to be honest, to talk to Twitch chat than it did to actually watch. Because the Twitch games are a bit boring, guys. They're really boring. You're not teaching anybody anything new. You're talking down to them. You're trying to turn against the Twitch chat because they're not reacting the way that you did, even though the trolls were much better than the trolls in almost every other channel. And we have audiences of potential people who care. There are a lot of games and a lot of gamers who, who play Magic, who play Hearthstone, who watch Mario Maker. They're just looking for an entertaining and fun experience. And you're not giving it to them. You have no idea what the memes are, and you're not trying to communicate to them in those sorts of senses. And then you get angry at them when they start trolling or they start memeing, which is what people do in Twitch. I don't get it. You're trying to be like, "Oh, well, this is professional." Nobody is there to watch Scrabble as a professional thing. They're there to have fun. They're there to have some sort of interactive experience with the commentators, who are really the most important people when it comes to the broadcast. You need to understand what, when people are memeing, you're supposed to have fun with it. You sounded like you didn't even want to. Do you care about this game? You sounded like you didn't want to be there, or like you were trying to provide some sort of professional sports broadcast experience, like golf or something like that. Go and watch a Twitch stream. It's fun. It's interactive. People like passion. They like stuff that they care about, and it just didn't come across that the people A, cared about the game and actually wanted to promote it, and B, had a fucking clue what they were talking about. And, numerous people in chat just kept saying, it felt like that they were being talked down to, or it just felt like, it was just boring in a lot of ways. And when people are bored, they're gonna troll. Twitch is gonna troll. That's what Twitch does. Learn what you're talking about. Especially, don't put yourself over the players, and promote the game. Promote aspects that you think are interesting or that you don't understand, and interact with the audience and try to care. Try to level with the audience. And if you can't do that or you don't want to do that, we need different commentators. But I just found, I'm glad that we got 4,000 people. I hope we continue to get 4,000 people. I'd like to see that number jump to 6,000 people the next time, and maybe we can get some sponsors, or heck, I'll throw in some money, like I said before. But you need an actual experience that people care about. And if you think that this is it, it's not. Ask Rashad, ask the guys who run the stream, or look at any stream that's popular. and you need a better experience. Or talk to the people who are in chat. I talked to probably about 20 or 30 of them. And they're interesting people, and they know what they want, and they're very, very willing to tell you what's wrong with the stream and how to make it better. But there wasn't any of that talk while you were there, and you weren't listening or trying to be entertaining. I don't know. That's my rant anyway. Um, anyway, guys, thanks for watching. If you have any feedback or you have any advice to how to make this recap better, or you want to sound off on anything that I said, feel free to leave a comment. And yeah, until next time.